2020, chemists isolated 3 brand new compounds from the leaves of this one wild shrub. Compounds that had never been documented anywhere in science before. When they tested them in human lung cells, all 3 shut down a key inflammation chemical called prostaglandin E2, and they did it in a very clear, dose-dependent way. That's Lindera benzoin, Spicebush, Cherokee, and Appalachian healers were already using this plant bark to break fevers and open the lungs 300 years before anyone in a lab knew why it worked. Today, I'm breaking down the energetics, the 2020 chemistry, that finally explains the folklore, exactly how to use spicebush as both food and medicine, and the one mistake almost every forager makes with this plant. So stick around, because at the end you'll be able to identify, harvest, and use spicebush. Let's start with energetics, because this is where spicebush gets slept on. Chew a fresh twig and you get pungent, spicy sweet, almost peppery, with a resinous citrus edge. That pungent spicy taste is your first clue. In herbal energetics, pungent moves. It disperses stagnation, opens the pores, and pushes circulation to the surface of the body. Temperature-wise, spicebush is warming, a stimulant, not a sedative. So, right away, you know it's lame. Anything cold, stuck, or sluggish, like congested digestion or a chilled body, fighting off a cold, or cramping from gas, that's spicebush territory. Its main actions are carminative, diaphoretic, and mildly stimulant. Carminative means it relieves gas and griping in the gut. Diaphoretic means it promotes sweating, which is exactly why 19th century Appalachian herbalists called it fever bush and used a hot bark decoction to break fevers and bring out the rash in measles. The organ affinities follow directly: the GI tract for digestion, and the lungs and exterior of the body for colds, fevers, and chest congestion. Now here's the part you may not have seen yet. In 2020, a team publishing in Phytochemistry Letters isolated 3 previously unknown bisabolane sesquiterpenes from spicebush leaves. And when those compounds were run through human A549 lung cells, those are human lung adenocarcinoma cells, all 3 reduced production of prostaglandin E2, which is a major driver of inflammation, in a dose-dependent way. And that's not folklore, that's a documented anti-inflammatory mechanism discovered in the actual American species growing in our Ozark understory. A 2024 genome study on spicebush also confirms something important. Across the entire genus of Lindera, researchers have now cataloged over 340 distinct constituents: sesquiterpenoids, alkaloids, flavonoids, and many of those are already linked to anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and anti-nociceptive activity. But here's the thing, most of that pharmacology comes from spicebush's Asian cousins, like Lindera aggregata and Lindera erythrocarpa, not from Lindera benzoin itself. And hold on to that thought, because it matters a lot in a few minutes. Now let's get practical, starting with medicine. For a cold or fever coming on, use the inner bark or young twigs. Simmer 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried, chopped bark or twig per cup of water for 10 to 15 minutes covered. Then drink it hot, up to 3 times a day at the first sign of chills or fever. Hot is key because you're leaning into that diaphoretic action, encouraging the body to sweat and push the fever through. For gentler daily use, digestion, mild gas, bloating after a heavy meal, steep 1 teaspoon of dried leaf or twig per cup as a standard tea for 10 minutes and drink after eating. That's your carminative dose, not your fever-breaking dose. Now here's a great combination. At the very first tickle of a cold, combine spicebush twig, fresh ginger root, and elderflower in equal parts as a hot infusion. Spicebush opens peripheral circulation and promotes sweating through its pungent warming action. Ginger adds direct digestive and circulatory stimulation and settles the stomach if nausea is involved. And elderflower, that's a classic diaphoretic in its own right, but it works specifically on mucous membranes, helping to clear sinus and upper respiratory congestion. Together, you get 3 different diaphoretic pathways firing at once: peripheral, digestive, and mucosal, instead of one herb doing all the work alone. Now for food, because spicebush might be the best kept secret in American foraging. The ripe red drupes, picked from late August through September, dry beautifully and grind into something remarkably close to true allspice. Colonial settlers used it specifically as an allspice substitute, and Appalachian cooks still call it wild allspice. Dry the berries whole, then grind fresh as needed, the same way you treat peppercorns, since the aromatic oils fade fast once powdered. And you can also harvest berries slightly underripe for a sharper, more peppery flavor. Grind them fresh, straight off the branch, as a wild pepper substitute, which lines up with the plant's traditional pairing with hunted meat in Cherokee cooking. The leaves and twigs also make a fragrant, citrusy, spicy tea on their own, no medicine intended. During the Revolutionary War, when imported tea was scarce, spicebush twig tea was a common Appalachian substitute. One more use worth trying: spicebush jelly, made by steeping the twigs and leaves into a strong tea and treating it like any herbal jelly base, with pectin and sugar. It comes out with a spiced, almost cinnamon clove flavor you won't get from rosemary or mint jelly. Now let's go over 4 common mistakes. The first one is treating spicebush as interchangeable with true allspice. True allspice is Pimenta dioica. That's a completely different plant in the myrtle family of the Caribbean. Now, while spicebush shares some of the same aromatic compounds through convergent chemistry, which is why the flavor is similar, but potency and exact profile aren't identical. So don't swap it 1-to-1 in a recipe that depends on precision. Mistake number 2, and this one matters for safety: misidentification. Spicebush grows in the same moist woodland edges as invasive Amur honeysuckle, which also produces red berries around the same time of year. In Arkansas, we do find Amur honeysuckle in the northern regions. Here's the fastest confirmation: crush a leaf or snap a twig. If it releases that citrus spice, almost allspice-like aroma, you have the real spicebush. No smell, no spicebush. Always confirm in person and never harvest on visual ID alone. Mistake number 3, spicebush is dioecious. Individual plants are either male or female, and only female plants produce berries. If you've planted one bush and it's never fruited, that's very likely why. You need a male plant for pollination, and that's the single most common reason home growers think they failed. Here's the fourth mistake, the one I flagged earlier. Most of the impressive sounding Lindera research circulating online, anti-cancer, anti-arthritic, neuroprotective, comes from Asian species like Lindera aggregata and Lindera erythrocarpa, not from our native Lindera benzoin. The 2020 anti-inflammatory study is genuinely about the American species, which is exactly why I led with it. Stay skeptical of any claim that borrows Asian Lindera data and applies it wholesale to the shrub growing in your own woods. The chemistry overlaps, but it isn't identical. Now here are our three biggest takeaways. First of all, Spicebush is warming and pungent with real carminative and diaphoretic action. And it's the American species specifically, not just its Asian cousins, that has documented 2020 published anti-inflammatory chemistry behind it. It's genuinely dual purpose, bark and twig tea for colds and digestion, dried berries as a wild allspice substitute, and even homemade jelly. Identify it by scent. Remember it's dioecious, so you need both a male and female plant for berries. And stay skeptical of research claims that quietly borrow from Asian Lindera species instead of the plant actually growing in your woods. Now, if this deepened your respect for a shrub that most people just walk past, hit subscribe. More videos are coming up that you won't want to miss. I'll see you there.